Hey church, welcome again to Testimony Tuesday, wherever you are around the world or Victoria or in the Bass Coast. A huge welcome to you. My name is Brendan and we've got Robyn here with us and we're doing Testimony Tuesday. Just a chance to hear what God is doing in people's lives, how God has grown people and challenged them. So Robyn, hey, welcome to Testimony Tuesday. I'd just love to hear how did God become real to you, in your in the early part of your faith journey? Yeah.
Well, I don't actually remember when I became a Christian. As a child, I obviously trusted in God.
Yeah.
But I was about 23 when I was really starting to question. The reason being, I grew up in a church which was three families. The pastor was a bully, a dictator. And if I was to describe our church, we had the dress rules of the exclusive brethren. So where the mini was starting to hemlines were coming up in the 60s, ours were quite long.
Going down,
yeah. Actually, we were threatened from the pulpit if we didn't bring them down 4 inches below our knees, God would bring them to the ground. So we quickly made sure we complied. Our food rules were the same as the Seventh-day Adventist.
Yeah.
And the adults were very arrogant because and I probably believed at the time too, we were the only church going to heaven. Yeah. So we were not allowed to fellowship with other Christians. They were sort of all on their way to hell. Yeah. Now as a child, you just absorb all this.
Yeah.
And then in my late teens, I was starting to question, and by the time I got into my 20s, I was thinking, why is it that our church is still three families? Mm-hmm. We preach on street corners 3 nights a week, we knock on doors, we're at church every night of the week, and no one was coming in. Wow. And I'm thinking, why? And I started to read the Bible in a different light, not just through the filters that the church was giving us, and asking lots of questions. But I was too scared to leave because God was presented, where the Bible says to fear God, it means to respect God, reverence Him. But we were taught fear was like to be really afraid. And I was too scared to leave because if I did, I was told that God would strike me down dead and I would go to hell. Oh, so it's really, really a scary situation to be in.
So how did you, I guess, filter some of those things and begin to understand the truth about God?
By reading the Bible and reading it without the filters of the church, but still being too scared to make a move because there was this fear in the back of my mind. Yeah. Anyway, we were not allowed to miss any meetings, and the company I work with, we wore a uniform, so that sort of helped with the dress stuff. They were having a meeting on a Saturday afternoon followed by a dinner, and I was warned if I didn't get back to Ballarat for that meeting that night, I'd be in trouble. Yeah. I decided to rebel and not go, but I wouldn't say I enjoyed the dinner because I was in tears most of the time. I was afraid. Yeah. Anyway, the next morning I turned up at church and my mother was praying for her daughter who was on her way to hell, and the pastor walked to the door and met me and said to get out, never to come back. I was stubborn and rebellious, so I was sort of excommunicated. And then my mother said, well, you can't live at home anymore because you'll take your brother and sister to hell.
Oh, mate.
So, but I knew God was real. Yeah. I was afraid of Him, but I knew He was real. And from my reading the Bible in a different light, I didn't give up on God, where my brother is an atheist. Yeah. So the next weekend I went to the Church of Christ, and that took a lot of courage because we were told they were all part of the daughters of
disillusioned and
Babylon.
Told some lies.
So. Anyway, this lovely, lovely gentleman, Pastor Mr. Frank Hunting, we called him Mr. not Pastor, he would have been in his 60s. Yeah. And I probably stood out, honestly, with my dress and I just really wasn't world savvy because we didn't mix in the world. Yeah. He and Hazel, his wife, took me for lunch every single Sunday afternoon. Wow. They taught me about faith, justification, redemption, all the basic tenets of the doctrine, the church doctrine. I knew none of that. All I knew was shouldn't watch TV, must wear long clothes, don't wear makeup, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So a few weeks later, I remember where I was living, I went and I knelt beside the bed and I rededicated my life to Jesus, and I can still feel what happened then. It was just this warm, fuzzy glow, like I was enveloped, and from that moment I was never afraid of God again. Wow. I had this wonderful relationship with Jesus which has continued. I have never doubted God's always been just so good to me in Jesus. But it took that, and I really thank God for Mr. Hunting, because there were young people who stayed in that church who never got out.
Yeah. So I guess it was just Mr. Hunting really loving you into the kingdom of God, loving and accepting you.
And teaching me,
Which is really what Jesus modelled.
I knew nothing about grace, I only knew about fear.
Yep.
I knew nothing about justification. So he was just, when I get to heaven, he's one person I really want to thank, Mr. Hunting. He saved my life, because otherwise I could have been very twisted by now. Or like my brother, an atheist.
Yeah. What's been, and I know you've served God overseas and in different churches, you know, as your story's continued. What's been a story where, or one of your greatest answers to prayer, where God has stepped into a situation and you're like, wow, that's just amazing?
I'm thinking about that. I would say the birth of our son.
Yep.
I find it hard to get pregnant, and I had 2 girls, and after it took us 6 years. We had 2 pregnancies in 6 years that failed, one at 12 weeks, at 19 weeks. And I was 40, and I really wanted a baby so much. And in my Bible reading, and I forget what, I wasn't Word for Today, it was something else I was doing at the time, it said that it was talking about Sarah laughing, right? It said we have to give our pipe dreams to God, and only He can give them back to us.
Yeah.
And that day we'd been on the am I pregnant, am I not? Am I pregnant? No, I'm not. That whole emotional merry-go-round. So that day I prayed and I said to God, I hand over this desire for a baby to you. And I'm not going to take it back. I had to. But to really reinforce that, Russell and I decided we'd build a house, because that would take over my thinking, something to focus on. Yep. Anyway, I went to the doctor for some reason, and he was a Christian. He now goes to Bendigo Baptist, Arthur Chang. And I said to him, we've decided we've got to get off this merry-go-round. I've given it over to God. As soon as Russell's got the house ready to sell, he's going to come and have a vasectomy, because we've got to really shut the gate, because if we don't shut the gate, I'm going to keep wanting this baby. And he looked at me and he laughed, and he said, it'll be surprising what God can do, you know, after you give things up. And I laughed, just like Sarah, I laughed. Do you know what? 9 months later, 10 months later, I had a baby. Wow. Our son at 41, and Lyndon's now 30, of course. But he was my miracle baby. But I had to actually...
You got 4 kids, don't you?
3.
3, sorry, yeah.
So I had to actually physically and seriously give this over to God and not take it back.
Yeah.
So he is my miracle baby.
It's great. What a great story. Just as we finish up, well, what does following Jesus mean for you in 2020? Maybe even living under COVID. Like, how does having a relationship with God affect your day-to-day life?
Having a relationship with God, I think, I was chatting to him all the way in on the car today. Yeah. I find my relationship with God as my Heavenly Father, I'm chatting on and off to him all day, you know, over this or over that. Yeah. Or I wake up in the middle of the night and I start praying to him, talking to him about things. I think he's so much a part of my life. Yeah. And as I was sharing with you before, I see myself these days as a seed sower, where we've been so involved in ministry before, and I go for a walk. Yeah. And someone will say, isn't it a lovely day? And like yesterday, it was a beautiful day. And this guy said to me, what a beautiful day. And I said, yes, God's given us that to enjoy. It's good. You know, there's always something I can come back with, seed sowing. And before I leave home, I always say, Lord, lead me to some soul today. Teach me, Lord, just what to say. And I think I've been using that line for the last 30 or 40 years. It's great. And it's just amazing the opportunities you get. Yeah. Not always sort of see it getting watered, but at least I'm sowing it, and that's the main thing. It's good, it's good. Hey, just to finish, have you got a favourite verse from the Bible that is just over the decades of your journey has just spoken to you time and time again? Or? It has, but I can't tell you the reference right now off the top of my head. But it's the one about always being prepared to give an answer. 2 Timothy. Yep. The reason for our hope. Yeah. And with gentleness, right, and respect, because the way I grew up, we sort of Bible bashed. Yeah. And I think, and I've seen results from that, especially with one very good friend of mine who I spoke to her for years, and I used to want to preach, but I couldn't. I'd just answer her questions and found out years later that she couldn't do anything about it because her husband forbade her, but the minute they split, she was She got to church and was saved. And she says she was listening. All those years she was listening, but I never knew that.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, always be prepared to give an answer. That's one of my probably most favourite ones.
Thank you, Robyn. Hey, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for sharing some of your story. And hey, church, I hope you enjoyed it. It's just been great to hear from Robyn. So, hey, stay tuned. And if you want to be a part of Testimony Tuesday, give me a call. I'd love to just ask you some questions about your faith and what God's been doing in it. All right, church, bye for now.